Welcome to Season 2, Episode 12 of The Gray Zone. Excited for this one. I'm inspired by some recent learnings, some stuff that, as normal, as per usual with this podcast, come from climbing, come from work. Excited to get into it. The theme of this episode today, it's around presence, but that's sort of an underlying theme. The broader theme is really realizing that knowledge is knowledge is kind of like this no man's land between useless and useful. It's one step away from useless and it's one step away from useful. And the difference comes down to whether or not you apply that knowledge and you execute on it. And through my life, through the experiences that I've had, both in climbing and otherwise, I was able to learn a little bit about presence. So part of that was driven by pain, just things that were happening in my life, insecurities that led me into climbing a little bit at the time. And what I loved about climbing was that it forced presence. Like when you're on a wall and you're scared and whatever else is happening kind of dissipates, it goes away and you just become so present, so focused. And that started to teach me about presence, and I saw how that applied to managing and dealing with my own insecurities as well. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about presence, and I learned about being present for the planning phase of first in climbing. So before you get on a climb, you want to think about what you're going to do to execute. Then when you're executing, you want to be fully focused on the task at hand, not concerned with how well it's going, simply being present, because then you actually tend to do better. And then afterwards, the analysis and being present in each of those phases, not getting distracted during the planning phase by getting worried about the outcome during the execution phase, or et cetera, et cetera. And the pain that I was feeling and being present in climbing taught me a lot about it, and I started to gain knowledge about presence and gain understanding about presence. But then over time, as my life went on, I managed and dealt with those insecurities, and the pain around that kind of went away. And that pain was initially a major driver that inspired me and forced me into presence. And I learned that presence isn't just relevant in climbing, it's relevant in life in general. It's especially relevant in sales, I find, where you want to execute on a call. You don't want to be worried about, are you doing better or worse than other people? Because that just gets in the way of your ability to execute. Before the call, you want to be present in the planning. You don't want to be distracted. So again, just like presence with tasks, presence with a knowledge of what am I going to do right now? Let me focus on that and not be distracted is so beneficial to the outcome. And I knew that and I understood that. But then as the pain went away, that driver, that motivation for presence also slowly went away, while the knowledge of it, the understanding of it stayed. And recently I've realized that the knowledge of it it was useless because I was no longer executing on it. But because I felt that I understood it, it was almost like I was playing myself. I was playing myself into thinking that I was still, because I knew about presence, I was being present. And that wasn't the case. And then now recently I've been in a situation, I'm new to the company, it's a startup, it's a more hectic environment. As startups in general, compared to where I was at before, a mature 23-year-old company, the processes, the standards are all very set, whereas here they're constantly changing and being reevaluated. And so that creates a little bit more chaos, and it also means it's a little bit easier to get distracted within a certain task and allow more variables to influence your presence. And because of this, I actually started to realize again, hey, I am not being as present as I once was, and therefore I'm not executing to the same level. And through this experience, through a little bit of this having to re-deal with a little bit more pain again around because of my lack of presence, I started to realize that knowledge that I gained was essentially useless because I wasn't applying it, and that just because I knew something once doesn't mean that it's just locked and loaded forever, and that's how I'm going to execute on it. To continue to be present, to continue to maintain and grow something regardless of what it is that you've learned, requires continuously being a little bit uncomfortable, but intentionally applying that thing. And just because you know something once doesn't mean you can sit back and relax and let that thing take over, because it won't. It'll go away. So a part of what has like forced me and allowed me to reintegrate presence was, again, kind of the pain of not being present again. And at the same time, finding a little bit more gratitude in my life. I've got a new relationship and it's going really well, and there's just so many good things to be grateful for that it's re-inspiring presence, because I want to enjoy what's going on right now. Like, life doesn't last forever. One day everything will end, and I really want to appreciate what's happening, and that's also inspiring presence. And so it's lovely to be in this place now where it's not just pain that's forced presence, but also, and a little bit of pain, but like in a good way, in a healthy way, which is why I moved companies in the first place, is to be uncomfortable again. And then also some gratitude, and bringing some gratitude into it. So it's been quite a lovely experience. And when I talk about how learning something once, knowing something once, doesn't mean that you've just got it ready for yourself forever. Like, yes, it's helpful to know it because then you can apply it. But for example, in rock climbing, just another sort of perspective to consider these same ideas from, another lens, trying hard is such a skill. Like, the ability to get on the wall and let it all out is, it's a skill. It needs to be practiced, and it's on its own. And you practice it by showing up and trying hard every time you're on the wall, unless the intention is specifically to do something else. And regardless, I think trying hard, it will be its own podcast episode, and it probably has been. But I've seen it in myself so many times where I've had these phases of growth and climbing where I'm trying very hard, and then you kind of enter these periods of a plateau where that effort isn't there. And so what happens is, let's say I've reached a new level of ability in climbing, which correlates to now climbing a harder climbs, harder grades. At first, to touch and reach those harder grades, if I was like at this level of ability, I needed to try really friggin' hard to start to meet that standard. I needed to try really hard. And eventually, you start to consistently meet that standard, and it takes less effort. But because you've associated that standard with a lot of effort, you start to feel and trick yourself into like, oh, I'm still trying super hard because I'm doing this thing that's hard. But no, it's actually not that hard for you anymore, and you're only trying this hard. And to continue to grow as a climber, because the presence comes when I'm trying really hard, and I'm trying really hard when something is difficult for me. You need to continue to push that level. And I think this is where that weird game can start to happen, where we're constantly making things more difficult for ourselves and chasing the next thing, the next career, the next paycheck, the next whatever it is, the next promotion. And it can feel hollow if we keep chasing that next step, that next goal, because we think that when we reach that next level of difficulty that we'll finally be satisfied. And I don't think that's the case. It's not in the achievement that we find satisfaction. It's in the process of achievement. Anyways, so that's the episode. I hope you enjoyed. A nice short one. Honestly, I prefer the short episodes. But yeah, enjoy. If you ever feel like working with me as a coach, feel free to reach out, and have a lovely day. See ya.